Hello again. It is time to do another video because that was my New Year's resolution to be more consistent with my videos. We are going to talk about several things that have been affecting the markets as of late, and it has been a ride this week. So let's get into it. First one, Fed Day. Yay! Okay, so the Federal Reserve concluded their meeting the day following my last video. They have decided not to move the interest rate, which is not unforeseen or unanticipated, because at the end of December, when they met for the last time in 2019, they had stated they don't foresee any need to move the interest rates at this point. And they would, of course, as always, look to see, how the economies are moving globally and domestically, what policies are being played out, what's happening in the markets, all of that, and the job markets, not the stock markets, but the job market, and they would look at what actions need to be taken, if any, at that point, and they would adjust accordingly. So the great economic answer of it depends. That's basically what they said. So that happened this past week, and given the fact that they haven't moved the interest rate, I would anticipate the jobs report that's coming out tomorrow to be fairly either moderate to positive. If it's negative, I'd be surprised just because the Federal Reserve didn't do anything to accommodate the labor market, and it's quite tight right now, which is a good thing. That means there's lots of jobs for people, lots of opportunities, which is always a good thing. All right, so on to the next one, which is the coronavirus. Oh, how sick of this are we already hearing about this? I had mentioned this in my last video, if that they can't contain the virus, that it's going to cause problems in the markets. Now, looking at the stock market, you would not think that, because the markets have been positive the majority of this week, especially with today, with not the Federal Reserve, but with China stating that they would take off tariffs of $75 billion worth of U.S. goods. So the markets celebrated this. But the problem is that this type of disruption in the economy, it's gonna lag. This hasn't been resolved yet, and so the full effect, the full cost of this economically is yet to be seen. The one bright side is that Thailand had come up with a treatment that they use, which is a mixture of the HIV medication and flu medication to fight the coronavirus, and it seems to be an effective treatment. They said that they see improvements within 48 hours, so that's a good sign. And you see China trying to implement this within their country right now. The spreading of this virus has, of course, been much more quick than people were anticipating, and so it's caused a lot of disruptions to trade and, of course, flights. People are definitely being restrictive in how they can move, just because you can't fly to or from China. At least some of the major airlines have kiboshed that. And movement within China is also starting to become more restrictive, just because it's spreading so quickly. The last estimation I saw for the death toll was like a little over 560, which is pretty fast. That's quite a bit. That's quite a bit of a death toll in such a short time frame. So this is definitely something to keep an eye on if they don't get better containment of this. And of course, everybody, this is starting to affect everywhere. There's very few places that hasn't had cases of it yet. Europe's had it, US has had it, Australia, Japan, Russia's also got some. And so it's starting to spread around quite a bit, just because there's so much mobility thanks to flights and open borders. And so we're seeing the effects of this being played out, the effects of mobility being played out with this virus. And so, again, the full economic cost of this virus is yet to be seen. Again, the markets only were positive just because China had stated that they need to take off the tariffs. This was part of the trade deal that was struck back in January between US and China, that China would take tariffs off of some of US goods, and US said the same thing about Chinese goods, but they had not actually put that into effect. They're putting into effect mostly because they need to at this point. They are again having disruptions economically, and so trying to mitigate some of that damage from the virus. They're allowing the tariffs to be lifted so that more trade can keep flowing, and it's really just to help them out. So it's not because they wanted to do this. They had to do this just because of the current situation that they're in. Another big thing that happened this week, Brexit. Okay, so that happened January 31st. They officially left the EU bloc, which has been really, that opens up a lot of opportunities for the UK. Now, why is this a big deal? Well, UK has historically seen themselves separate from the European region in general. They've been part of the EU for a long time. The EU has dictated a lot of policies that UK didn't necessarily want or agree with. They went along with it because they were part of the EU. The final straw came back about 2015, when there were some policies that dealt with immigration, and that was the final straw for Brexit. And since then, they've been pushing for this to occur. Now, it's finally done. It's taken 4 years for it to finally be done, but it was called a no-deal Brexit, meaning they didn't have an agreement with the EU for trade before they left. Now, they have from now until end of the year, which is only now, they've got 8 months to figure out a trade deal between the UK and the European bloc. Now, this is where it's going to get messy because, let's be honest, the EU, they have no intention of making this easy. They've made this difficult already trying to leave. Now they're going to make sure it's difficult to trade because they want to send a message to any of the other members of the European Union bloc that if they try to leave, it's going to be a mess, that the EU is going to make it very difficult for them. Because if other countries leave, now this is going to start disrupting that balance of power that the EU has had over the whole European area. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, to be honest. If you look at like Germany and France, they have profited greatly from the European bloc. On top of that, they are in the Euro bloc, and both of those things have benefited them just immensely for their economies. And so if you look at in the EU bloc, Germany is actually the economic stronghold. France is second, and it's a very close second. France is gaining up on Germany quite a bit. And so this now allows the UK to really freely trade with whomever they desire and on whatever terms that they want to come to when it comes to trade, which is a good thing. And that allows for a lot of more flexibility over their own economy. They were never part of the Euro bloc. They've always been on their own currency, which is the pound. Margaret Thatcher was approached when she was prime minister by the EU and the Euro bloc to get off the pound and come onto the Euro, and she absolutely fought against it, which is why Brexit could even happen. If they were on the Euro, this would have been incredibly difficult to almost impossible for them to get out, just because there was the hurdle of the EU and then another hurdle of the Euro. Because they were on their own currency, this was able to officially happen. So this is going to be opening up more trade with the US. I believe in the future that the US and UK ties will become much tighter now that they are free to make policies of their own. I mean, they had their own policies, of course, but they actually still had to take in, on top of their own policies, they also had to implement the policies the EU imposed, which they no longer have to do that. And I'm not saying the EU is bad or anything by any means. It's just that far as trade goes, Germany and France have profited from it greatly, and the other countries have as well, but not to the extent, anywhere near the extent of Germany and France. And if you really look at it, I don't know how you could think that that many countries could go into a trade deal like this and not have, somebody come out on top. There was no way that it was going to stay on a level playing field. So this is where it's a big disruption. The fact that Brexit happened, now there's a threat of other countries, especially the ones that are not on the euro, to try to leave the EU bloc. And that is where the EU is going to be very adamant about trying to, make this trade deal pretty difficult and not in the favor of the UK. Just because, again, they kind of want to send that message to other countries. Hey, if you're thinking about this, it might not be in your best benefit. But the UK is officially left, which, again, oh my gosh, I didn't really think it was going to come anytime soon. Holy cow, they've been talking about it for so long. And but Boris Johnson was very much like, we're done. And they were serious about leaving. So that happened. Okay, another fun event that happened this week. This is the ticker symbol for Tesla Motors. Okay. That thing has been on a ride this week. Holy cow. At its height, it was $9.60 per share. My goodness. It has skyrocketed over the last... This whole week was really the biggest jump. It's had successes which caused the price to start going up. But then there was over exuberance of the stock, which is what pushed it up quite a bit. On top of that, you had short sellers trying to cover themselves. So let's talk about this, because this was, wow, those were some big swings. So Tesla opened up their factory in China, and that helped to push up the stock price a little bit. Then they were successful with SpaceX with multiple launches and landings of spaceships. So that helped of rockets. Then their earnings report came out and it pushed their stock price up. So it's been going up, 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 up. Well, you have short sellers that what they're doing is they're selling their stock. Short sellers sell a stock, assuming that the stock price will get lower. So what'll happen is they'll sell it here, and then they'll buy it back when it's lower, and then that disparity is their profit. So they're selling it, and they're expecting the price to go down. Well, you have an immense amount of short sellers against Tesla. I don't know what it is, but some of these people really, really, really don't like Tesla. So they were short selling, and they were expecting the stock price to go down. Well, instead, it was going up, 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 and then they started panicking, because if the stock price goes up and they sold it down here, they have to cover that sell and buy it at whatever the market price is to cover that sell. So here, the stock price keeps going up, and they've sold down here. That's a pretty big gap of a deficit, of a loss that they're taking. So you had a lot of them trying to cover those costs, and they're going out to the market and buying a whole bunch of Tesla stock to cover the short sell. And so then that pushed the stock price even higher, because you have all these people flooding the market to buy the stock, and it keeps pushing it higher and higher because there's such a high demand for it. So that's part of the reason that we saw it really shoot up in a matter of couple of days, and then it's come back down a little bit. So it was estimated that the loss on short sells on Tesla stock was around $5.8 billion, which, holy cow, that's a lot. I don't know what it is, but they really don't like Tesla. And so they were really pushing to have that stock tank, but it didn't. It was going the opposite direction. So you can imagine, a lot of people flooding into the market trying to cover their short sales when they keep seeing that stock price go up and up and up. That gets very expensive very, very quickly. So, and because they're not short selling like a share, they're short selling like hundreds of shares. So it's quite a bit. So those are all the major big events that happened this week. As always, if you guys have any questions, put them in the comments below, and go ahead and hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys later.